At the hospital check-in desk, my son told the nurse, "He's not my responsibility anymore. Do the cheapest thing," while turning away. But when doctor came out holding the signed authorization, the waiting room stared. He couldn't speak. He said it loud enough for the whole waiting room to hear, and he said it like he was ordering another coffee. "He's not my responsibility anymore. Do the cheapest thing." If you're reading this on your sofa, on a bus, from a dorm room, or standing in your kitchen with the light over the sink humming, tell me where you're watching from, because I want you to see this room with me. I want you to smell the disinfectant and the winter on people's coats. I want you to feel the pause that fell after his words, the way even the printer behind the glass seemed to stop spitting paper. People looked up from their screens. The nurse, a woman with tired eyes and a small pin that said RUTH, blinked once and then twice, like maybe she misheard. He turned away while he said it, "My son," and the turn was the real blow, not the sentence. The turn, as if I were a sound he was done listening to. I stood close enough to see the tremor in his hand as he slid the clipboard back under the window. I could see the smooth face of his watch catch the white light. He had bought it last year with a bonus he didn't tell me about. He liked saying bonus the way some men like saying victory, like it proved something. "Do the cheapest thing," he repeated, softer now, as if it were a professional decision instead of a sentence you say about a father who taught you to ride a bike in a parking lot behind a church. I didn't say anything. I didn't argue. Not because I agreed, because I learned a long time ago that anger shouts and power whispers. My voice, when I use it, is a flat note. Today I kept it in my pocket. The room had the tired look of a place that has broken many people and promises to keep breaking more. A boy in a red hoodie leaned forward. An old man coughed into a cloth handkerchief, and his wife patted his back like she had done it 1,000 times and would do it 1,000 more. The nurse asked my son for my date of birth. He rattled it off. He still remembered that at least. Then she asked about insurance, about next of kin. He said, with that calm that wasn't calm, "Just basic care." He didn't look at me. I didn't look at him. I looked through the glass where a calendar showed a little lighthouse for this month, brave and alone on a cliff. Funny what your eyes cling to when your heart wants to break. I had been in this hospital before, a lifetime ago, when he was 5 and the fever wouldn't let go. He lay in a bed with rails that seemed too high, his hair damp and stuck to his forehead, and he breathed in little gasps that made my wife press the back of her hand to her mouth. I sat up that night with a paper cup of bad coffee that turned my stomach, and I told him, stories about a captain and a ship and a whale that could swallow the moon. He smiled with his eyes closed, and when the nurse changed the IV, he made a little sound, and I told him, "It'll be okay." I said it because it had to be true. My wife, in her blue shawl that smelled faintly of cardamom, stood at the window and prayed under her breath. The same building, the same hallways, different winter, different man. The nurse slid a form back through the little gap. He signed. I watched the pen trace his name, the letters practiced and fast, the way he signs contracts and bar receipts and birthday cards that already say everything so he can say nothing. His wife stood a step behind his shoulder, tapping her phone with nails the color of cherries. She didn't look at me either. Earlier in the car she had said, "We're late," when my chest tightened again and I asked for a minute to breathe. Her bracelets clicked when she crossed her arms. Her mother had not come, but I could hear her too, the syrupy voice, the poor thing. Not about me, but about their son, who had married into his father's shadow. Shadows make some people cold, some build a fire, some try to move the sun. You think I didn't want to correct him? You think I didn't want to say, "Don't you dare"? My tongue sat heavy behind my teeth. My heart beat in my ears, then steadied. My wife used to say, "Not the loud thing, love, the right thing." "Not today, Ethan," I said to him in my head, borrowing the version of him that was still a boy in a dinosaur t-shirt. "You'd be in the way. My strength has never been in the shout. It's in the wait. It's in the way." I take a breath and count to 5 and remember that doors open for paper that speaks and close for men who bark. The truth that none of them knew was folded twice in the inside pocket of my coat. Paper doesn't weigh much, but it can anchor a life. I had spent so many evenings after my wife's funeral reading things with titles like Advance Directive, Power of Attorney, Designation of Proxy, Dry Words, Necessary Scaffolding. I named someone who was not my son to speak when I could not. A woman who had worked with my wife at the community clinic, who had driven soup to our house when the chemo made everything taste like rain. I also called the insurance agent I'd known since before Ethan could tie his shoes and asked him to upgrade my plan. "Why now?" he asked gently. "Because he had attended my wife's burial and knew not to fill the air with empty sympathy." "Because later comes fast," I said. He upgraded it to the thing with the name that sounds like a hotel suite. I paid it from an account Ethan doesn't know about. The account made of mornings before dawn and the discipline to say no to small luxuries for the sake of a larger promise. I did not tell my son. I didn't tell him because power that advertises itself is theater, not power. The nurse, Ruth, looked at me. Directly then, for the first time since the words cheapest thing had hardened the air. "Sir, are you in pain right now?" she asked. I liked that she called me sir. Not because I need bowing and scraping, but because dignity is a medicine all its own. "I can wait," I said. My voice came out level, flat like a calm lake that hides a deep cold. "We'll get you triaged in just a moment," she said, and her eyes flicked to my son's signature like a swallow catching a mayfly. She is a woman who knows what papers mean. She is also a woman who has watched people betray each other over clipboards. Her mouth tightened a little. She nodded at me, and I nodded back. And in that small nod, we agreed to wait for the next thing together. If you're reading this from anywhere with a window, look out for a second and tell me what you see. Because that day the hospital windows were a mirror. I saw myself older than I had felt that morning, older than the ache in my chest, older than the gray that had crept into my beard in quiet months after the funeral. Grief ages you like weather, slow then all at once. The waiting room smelled like lemon cleaner and the wet wool of a dozen coats. A TV mounted near the ceiling showed a cooking show with the sound off. Hands slicing onions, mouths smiling in silence. My son's mouth did not know how to smile in silence. His jaw set hard. He checked his phone. He checked the clock. He checked the door to the parking lot, measuring escape routes like a man who wanted to be anywhere else but here, except that the story would cling to his coat when he left, and people would see it even if he changed his clothes. What the room didn't see was the small photograph in my wallet, the one of my wife with her hair in a braid, her head thrown back in a laugh because Ethan had fallen asleep on the picnic blanket holding a sandwich like a trophy. Sometimes I take the photo out and hold it like a relic. Today I didn't. Today I only touched the leather edge with my thumb, and that was enough to remember exactly how she smelled after the rain, and exactly how her hand felt on my wrist when she said, "Promise me he will never feel alone in a hospital." I promised. I kept the part I could. I stayed. I stood. I did not let my hurt take the microphone. I let the paper in my pocket do the talking later. "Mr. Rahman?" the nurse called, returning to the glass. I stepped closer. My son stepped back, as if my moving forward required his retreat. "We're going to get you in for an EKG," she said. "Basic vitals now. Doctor will speak to you before any further steps." She looked at the signature again. It sat there, black and certain, like a line of ants marching off a table. "We'll need a moment," she added, and the way she said it told me she planned to ask someone a question. She was the sort of person who follows rules and also the sort who knows how to look for better ones when the rule isn't right. SSB. The far side of the room, a toddler threw a plastic truck and then giggled when it skidded into a chair leg. His mother looked at me with that quick apologetic smile women give strangers on hard days. I smiled back, small. It is remarkable how kindness can fit into very small spaces. My son didn't notice. He was reading an email. His wife had put her phone away at last and now held her purse close to her ribs like a shield. She avoided my eyes so completely that it would have been funny if it wasn't so sad. When I exhaled and felt the pinch in my chest ease just a fraction, she glanced over with a look I couldn't read. Pity, fear, accounting. There are ledgers in certain hearts, and every line in them has a price. I know some of you will ask why I didn't fight, why I didn't slap the desk or rip up the paper. Listen. I built my life from patience, and patience taught me that the person who speaks first in a negotiation is usually the person who gives something away. I had nothing to give. He had already taken the small respect a son owes a father in public. What he did not know was that I had taken the time to build the kind of safety that does not need his consent. You can prepare a house for a storm, and the storm might still come, but the shutters will hold because you measured them in the quiet months. I had measured They led me to a chair near the blood pressure cart and told me to wait for the aide. I moved slowly, not out of weakness, but because I have learned that slow movement in a room like this makes people kinder. It reminds them that time is a fabric not to be torn. My son stayed standing by the door. If you had walked in then, you would have thought he was a man waiting for a ride, not a son waiting for a doctor who would speak his father's name. He rubbed the bridge of his nose with his thumb and forefinger, the way he used to do before exams in high school, the way he did at the wake when people kept pressing his hand and telling him his mother was in a better place. He hates being touched when he hurts. He wears anger like armor when what he feels is fear. A young aide came, a boy with a buzz cut and kindness in his awkward posture. He wrapped the cuff around my arm and looked up at the beep of the machine. "A little high," he said, and I nodded. "Lot of talking in here," I said, and he smiled because we both knew there had been one sentence that did most of the talking. He wheeled the cart away, and I let my breathing settle again into a rhythm I could keep. 5 inches. Hold, 5 out. My wife taught me that, when the cancer made her lungs feel like locked doors. "Air is air," she'd say, "and we will take what we can of it." A door at the end of the corridor opened a few inches then, and closed, and a heel clicked on tile. The nurse looked down the hall, then back at me. Things move quickly in hospitals, and also very slowly. Time there is elastic. A minute can be a day, and a day can be a minute. I folded my hands in my lap and straightened my spine, and thought about the envelope in my inner pocket again. About the ink, about the way my lawyer had said, "If anything happens, they will call me, not him. Are you sure?" "Yes," I had said. "I am sure." She had looked at me long, like a doctor palpating a wound, and then nodded. People in the waiting room returned to their screens one by one as the silence on our side of the glass stretched thin and then settled. But silence has a second edge. The boy in the red hoodie whispered something to his sister, and they both turned to look at my son and then away with that special mix of judgment and curiosity only the young can manage. My son pretended not to see. He tucked his hands into his coat pockets. He checked the door again. He didn't have words left for me, and that was fine. I didn't need any. Words are currency, and I intended to spend mine at a more useful counter. Call it pride if you want. I call it preparation. I call it love that learned to build in the dark when the lights went out. The nurse spoke to someone I couldn't see, low and quick. The printer woke again and sang its little sound. Papers came out face down. She gathered them like a dealer gathers cards and tapped them square on the counter. My son looked at the stack as if it might bite him. He had never been afraid of paper before. He should have been. The door at the end of the hall opened wide enough now to let a white coat through. Shoes, steady, shoulders, relaxed. The doctor carried something in his hand, a folder, and inside it, I knew, was the kind of decision my son thought belonged to him until the moment it didn't. He started toward us, and the waiting room did that thing crowds do when the air changes. Faces lifted, breath held. I breathed in. I breathed out. I sat very still. I thought of the lighthouse on the calendar, small but stubborn against the winter sea. And as the doctor's eyes found mine, calm, certain, I rested my thumb once more on the edge of my wallet where my wife smiled forever at a sleepy boy and a sandwich, and I waited for the sound of paper finally speaking where my voice would not. The doctor stepped into the waiting room with the calm walk of someone who has already decided something. He was not young and not old, the kind of man whose hair has made peace with gray along the edges, whose voice has learned to be even when everything around it is not. His name tag flashed once under the lights, and I caught the name without really trying. Malik. He held a folder in one hand and a pen in the other, and the pen clicked once, twice, like a small metronome bringing order to a messy song. "Mr. Rahman," he said, looking at me and not at my son, and that alone tilted the room a degree in my favor. I lifted my chin. Beside the glass, the nurse, Ruth, watched him with the relief people save for a good captain in rough water. My son spoke before I could. He stepped in as if to block the doctor's line of sight, one hand skimming the front of his coat, the other pointing with the sharp edge of a finger toward the clipboard on the counter. "I already signed," he said. It sounded like he wanted to sound helpful, but it landed as a warning. Cheapest plan, basic options. He doesn't need anything extra. That word, extra, hung like a bad smell. A woman in a green scarf looked up from her phone. The boy in the red hoodie stopped chewing his gum. The doctor's eyes went to the signature, then back to my face. He didn't hurry. His gaze had the solid weight of someone who looks at scans all day and learns to read the shadows. "We'll get you comfortable," he said to me, and then to my son. "You're his—" He let the question roll out and settle. My son straightened. "I'm his son," he said, like the word itself was a key that opened any door in the building. "Wonderful," the doctor said, calm in a way that held no warmth and no ice. "Before we proceed, we need to confirm the patient's directive on file and the authorized decision-maker." He tapped the folder lightly. Not a threat, a fact. My son blinked like someone had flashed a light too close to his eyes. "I just told you," he said, and there was a tiny crack in his tone, a hairline fracture you might miss if you didn't know what to listen for. I knew. I sat still and watched the doctor as if he were a chess piece I had moved 3 turns ago. He looked back at me. "Sir, are you comfortable answering a few questions?" he asked. "Yes," I said. My voice was level. I gave him my full name, my date of birth, the address I moved to after the funeral when the big house felt like an echoing museum. He listened, nodding once in a while, resting the pen across the folder like a baton. "Do you have pain now?" he asked. "Pressure," I said. "Not pain. Breathing is tight. It comes in waves." He said it back to me, slow, like he was laying stones in a straight line. Then he looked at my son again and said, "And we'll also confirm the proxy. There's a record here." The pen clicked again, that little heartbeat. And with it, something inside me stepped sideways into a warm room where my wife was alive. I saw her sitting at the small desk by the window, the one we had found in a thrift store and refinished together, the one with a small nick in the top where she had once dropped a teacup. Papers were spread in front of her. She had tucked her braid into a loop and she was biting the tip of her pen, pretending to read legal language, pretending to be bored, but her eyes were bright. "This is all so dry," she had said then, smiling sideways at me. "But dry can save your life." She looked at me with that look that meant she had decided something and wanted me to think it was my idea. "Promise me we will not leave chaos behind," she said. "We will leave clarity." I promised. We signed, we copied, as mailed. We put the original in the safe behind the books about ships and storms. My son didn't know any of that. Or if he did, he had let it slide off him the way water slides off a jacket you only wear for rain. He wore his confidence the same way he wore his coat. Well cut, expensive, a little too tight when he had to move quickly. "Look," he said now to the doctor, too loudly for a quiet room. "I'm here. I'm saying what to do. There's no one else." He spread his hands as if the gesture itself could wipe away ink. His wife touched his sleeve without looking at him. "Ethan," she said under her breath, a warning meant only for him. The doctor's face didn't change. He lifted the folder an inch, just enough for the edge of a blue form to show. "There is someone else," he said gently. "We have a valid, notarized advance directive and medical power of attorney naming a proxy. We'll confirm her availability now. While we do that, we will begin necessary diagnostics. Your father is our priority." The room breathed in. The room breathed out. People looked at anything that was not my son's face. He did not speak for a second. The first second of stillness from him since we arrived. Then he laughed once, that small, wrong laugh men use when they are lost in a place where a map used to be. "This is ridiculous," he said, but he said it softer, as if someone had turned the volume down on his chest. "I'm his son." He kept saying the same thing because he thought the fact was a spell. The doctor nodded like a man nods to a child standing near a hot stove. "Of course," he said, "and we'll keep you informed." He turned to the nurse. "Let's get an EKG, labs, chest x-ray, put him on oxygen if his SATs dip below 94. I'll be right there." He placed the folder on the counter. When the folder touched the surface, I heard the small weighted sound of paper with signatures that matter. If you are reading this with your phone in your hand and a window near you, tell me what the weather is doing. That day, the hospital doors breathed in people and breathed out cold, and with each breath, I felt something inside me lifting like a tide. Because this wasn't about winning. It was about dignity. It was about the promise I made to my wife when she sat with her shawl wrapped around her like a small, brave tent. It was about the nights I watched our son sleeping with a fever, a damp curl stuck to his temple, and told him, "You're safe," even when I wasn't sure. He grew up and put his safety in bank accounts and brand names. I put mine in paper that holds up in a storm. The nurse came around the counter and touched my wrist, the way a skilled person does, claiming your body for a purpose and giving it back to you at the same time. "Let's get you to triage," she said. I stood, my legs held. The pressure in my chest swelled to the edge of pain and then stepped back, as if it had seen someone it didn't want to fight. My son moved as if to follow. The nurse looked at him once, not unkindly. "We'll call you when the doctor is ready to discuss," she said. She didn't add "with the proxy," but the words sat in the air anyway. My son's mouth set. He looked at me, finally, and for a very small half-second, I saw past the coat and the watch and the words that had hurt. I saw the boy who had asked me once if thunder could break the sky. I saw fear. I looked away before I could forgive it too soon. We went down a short hall that smelled like alcohol swabs and old paint. A monitor beeped somewhere. A soap dispenser coughed. The triage bay had a curtain printed with a pattern that wanted to be cheerful and settled for complicated. Ruth clipped a small black device to my finger and watched numbers on a screen. 96, she said. Good. She wrapped the blood pressure cuff again, and the squeeze stole my breath and then gave it back. You're doing well, she said, not like a lie, but like a plan. A young tech slid the EKG stickers onto my chest, cool circles on warm skin, and I stared at the ceiling tile with its tiny holes that always remind me of constellations no one names. The machine drew its quiet mountains and valleys. The tech's eyes flicked. He said nothing. Professionals learn to let silence do the heavy lifting. While the printer spat the EKG strip, the doctor leaned into the bay. He had a phone tucked between his shoulder and ear. Yes, he said into it. We have him here now. I have the form you signed on file. I'll need your verbal consent to proceed with the plan of care. His eyes went to mine. He mouthed the name, Farah. I nodded once. He listened, said, thank you, said, I'll call with updates, and ended the call with the calm push of a thumb. He looked at me directly then. She's reachable, he said. She was expecting this call. I tasted relief that was not sweetness but water when you are thirsty. Of course she was, I said, and my voice was still the flat lake, but there was sun on it now. Do you see how simple it can be when you prepare? It took 2 signatures long ago, and a woman with a good heart to outlast a bad hour. Later, this will look like a twist to people in the comments who say they saw it coming. For me, it wasn't a twist. It was a straight line we drew on a hard day because we knew an even harder day might come. The doctor tapped the EKG paper and nodded at a number I could not name. We'll run bloods, he said. We'll get imaging. For now, I want you on a monitor and a little supplemental oxygen to make it easier to breathe. I said, do what you would do for a man whose life matters. He half smiled, not like a joke, like an agreement. That's the only kind of care we give, he said, and I believed him. Back in the waiting room, my son shifted his weight from one foot to the other, as if the floor had suddenly become an idea he disliked. His wife whispered to him again. We can't afford, she started, then stopped because she remembered the room has ears. He rubbed his forehead and said softly, I signed the basic. It should be fine. She didn't answer. Money is the language they speak to each other when they are angry and when they are scared. It is the language they learned from her mother, who once stood in my kitchen and told me that open shelves were low value, and then suggested I sell the heavy old table my wife loved and buy something lighter. I like heavy, I had said then. It doesn't tip when you lean on it. In triage, I thought about the table and about the safe behind the books. The safe door is heavy too. When I opened it after the funeral and put the paper inside, I thought of all the small things that become enormous when you need them. A signature, a date, a name in the right box. The lawyer had made 3 copies. One went to the hospital system, one went to her, one stayed with me. Redundancy, she said, smiling like a pilot showing you where the exits are. You'll never need all 3. That's why we make 3. I folded mine once, then again. I put it in the coat I wear on cold days, and on days when I might need to remind the world that I know what I'm doing. The tech peeled the stickers off my chest and said, all done for now. The nurse adjusted the pulse oximeter on my finger and said, you're steady. The doctor said, I'll go update the chart and print the authorization confirmation. We'll proceed with your plan. He lifted the folder. I watched his hand as he did it. He had the hands of a person who fixes things that people can't see. He stepped away, and I could hear his shoes. You learn to measure hope by footsteps when you live in hospitals for a time. When he was gone, I let my head fall back for a moment against the thin cushion and let a memory ride in. It was the day of our son's college graduation. He had looked so tall in the gown, the square cap crooked, tassel tickling his cheek. He hugged me hard, then his mother, and whispered, "I'll make you proud." I had said, "You've already done that." There was a photo of us that day, his arms around both of us, his chin tucked down, our faces bright under a sky so blue it hurt to stare at it. Somewhere on the road from there to here, a bridge went out. You don't always hear the crack when a weight limit is passed. You only know it when your foot feels for the plank and finds air. A nurse from imaging came with a wheelchair, and I told her I could walk. "Hospital rules," she said, smiling, and I let her. The chair squeaked on one wheel, a friendly small complaint. As we passed the open door to the waiting room, I saw my son standing stiff as if someone had told him to freeze. The doctor had returned and was speaking to him, low and clear. He held a sheaf of papers in one hand, a fresh printout, edges crisp. My son's eyes went to the top page, and then to the line beneath it where a name was typed in bold. His head jerked like a bird hearing a window it didn't see. The room shifted its attention that way, the sea turns toward a rocking boat. I watched just long enough to know the moment had landed, and then we moved on. Imaging was the same as it always is, a machine that doesn't care about your feelings, and a person beside it who does. The tech told me to lie still. The machine hummed like a big refrigerator dreaming about snow. I counted my breaths and named my wife's favorite things in my head in the pauses between the hums so I would not think about anything else. The smell of cinnamon, the feel of warm laundry, the sound of our son learning the piano song he loved and hating it, and then loving it again. When it was done, the tech covered me with a thin blanket and said, "Back to triage," as if I had asked and he had said yes. On the way back, we passed a window with the blinds half closed. Outside, a leaf skated across the parking lot like a small paper boat trying to find the ocean. I thought about boats. I thought about lighthouses. I thought about men who think they are the sun and can move other people's tides by turning their backs. In triage, the nurse took the blanket and tucked the edges under my arms in a quick, kind move that reminded me of how my wife used to tuck in the corners of our bed so tight you could bounce a coin. "We'll give you a little oxygen now," she said, fitting the cannula under my nose. The first cool whisper of it felt like a blessing. I heard the printer again before I saw the doctor. Papers can make their own weather. The sound of printing in a hospital is like a flag snapping in wind you cannot see yet. I sat up a little. The nurse checked the numbers and gave me a nod that said, "You may sit up all you like." I listened to footsteps that were not rushing and not dragging. They were the footsteps of a man bringing news he knows will change the room. The curtain ruffled. The doctor appeared beside it, folder in the crook of his arm, fresh pages on top. The black square of a signature block filled with a clean, careful name I knew well. He looked at me. He looked toward the waiting room. "Ready?" the nurse said softly, and I realized she was asking about the walk back as much as the moment itself. "Ready," I said. I stood with the care you take when everything inside you has been on a boat and you're stepping onto a dock you trust. We moved toward the opening, and the doctor went ahead with the papers. He pushed the door with his shoulder and stepped into the waiting room, carrying the signed authorization like a small, quiet verdict. The sound of talk fell away. Heads lifted in a ripple. Even the TV seemed to hold its breath. I saw my son look down at the top page again, and then up at the doctor, and then, at last, at me. The room watched the path between his eyes and mine like a road after rain. The doctor cleared his throat, not to be heard, but to mark the beginning of a sentence that would not need to be repeated. The doctor didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. He stepped a little closer to the counter, tilted the folder so the top page could be seen, and spoke in that even way that makes people listen. "We have a valid advance directive on file," he said. "The name proxy is Ms. Farah Siddiqui. She has confirmed authorization by phone. We will proceed with the medically indicated plan of care. Financial authorization is already in place under the patient's plan." He paused there, letting each part sink in, like placing clean plates on a table before a meal. My son opened his mouth fast, then closed it. Opened it again. "That can't be right," he said at last, but the words came out without any of the iron they had before, like a nail left too long in rain. I signed the form. I asked for basic. We can't. He glanced around and stopped himself because the room was not empty and because the word he wanted was money and the room had ears. His wife's hand found his sleeve, but her fingers didn't hold. They hovered. You can tell a lot about a person by the way they touch or do not. The doctor looked at him without anger. Your form doesn't apply here, he said, calm and kind at once. Your father's directive supersedes it. His insurance plan covers the care we're recommending. There's no decision for you to make on that front. He turned to me and added, we'll keep you comfortable and we'll move quickly. His eyes were steady. The waiting room watched the space between us like it was television, and the sound had suddenly come back on. The old man with the handkerchief leaned forward. The boy in the red hoodie stopped chewing and pressed the gum flat against a back tooth without thinking about it. Even the woman with the green scarf lowered her phone an inch, as if the screen had turned shy. I felt something lift inside me that wasn't joy and wasn't triumph. It was steadiness. A plank slid back into place in a bridge I thought might be gone. I let out a breath I hadn't realized I was holding and nodded. Thank you, I said. 2 words, enough. The doctor gave me the kind of nod men exchange when they are both in the habit of keeping promises. My son tried again, softer. There must be a mistake, he said. He never told me about any plan. He never told me about her. He pointed at the printed name like it was a stain. The nurse slid a fresh sheet from the printer with a soft flourish and set copies down on the counter. The doctor placed 1 copy in my son's hand. No mistake, he said. If you have questions for the patient advocate, we'll bring them over. For now, we need to focus on your father. He didn't say it with a period you could argue with. He said it like the end of a line in music, the only note that fits. If you're reading this on a couch or at a desk or on a bus that keeps stopping too fast, tell me what your hands are doing. Mine were still. I kept them still on purpose. My wife used to say that when you cannot control the room, you can always control your hands. It makes you look stronger than you feel, and sometimes that's enough to remind your spine what it is for. I watched my son look down at the copy of the directive, his eyes catch on the date, 3 years ago, 2 months after his mother's funeral, and then skip to the signature. He knew my handwriting. He knew the square, careful way I made my R. He knew the strong, simple way Farah wrote her name. His mouth opened for the 3rd time. No sound. He closed it again. The room turned and watched that small silence like a candle flickering in a draft. A memory came quick and sharp. My wife at the clinic, her hair braided and tucked up. A thermos of tea in her bag, because hospital tea always tastes like cardboard, and she wouldn't allow that for other people. Farah met us at the side door, late, her cheeks pink with cold, a smudge of pen ink on one knuckle. She hugged my wife hard and smiled at me with tired eyes that still had warmth in them. He's stubborn, my wife told her, jerking her chin at me. He has 1,000 good reasons to wait, but I told him, dry paper on a dry day, not wet paper in a storm. Farah laughed softly, agreed, opened the office with a key that had a little bird on the ring, and set the papers on the desk in a neat fan. She explained each page in simple words. My wife nodded at the parts that mattered and made sure I understood the parts I wanted to skip. We signed, we copied. Farah slid the clinic copy into a file with a red tab. You'll never need it, inshallah, she said, touching my wife's arm. But you have it. My wife squeezed her hand. Clarity, she said, no chaos. I didn't love the conversation, but I loved the woman I was trying to keep safe, so I loved whatever she loved that day. Back in the present, the doctor turned slightly and the room seemed to rotate with him. Sir, he said to me, we'll take you to observation in a moment. We'll start oxygen and nitroglycerin if needed, draw blood for troponin, get a chest x-ray report read, and keep you monitored. Is there anything you want me to know? I looked at him and said the thing I say when the future is a fog. Do what you would do if your own father came in. He half smiled, small and real. I will, he said. I always do. My son's wife finally found her voice. Can we talk to someone about costs? She asked, and the words were careful, like someone carrying a bowl filled to the brim. The doctor didn't look tired when he answered, but he could have. This is covered, he said. There is no decision for you to make there either. She nodded, once, twice, eyes darting like minnows. She touched my son's wrist. He didn't move. He was looking not at me, not at the doctor, but at the line on the page where Farah's name sat in black and certainty. He had thought signatures were his language now, his alone. He had forgotten that I once taught him how to hold a pen. The nurse came around the counter with a wheelchair and a little tray of supplies. "Ready?" she asked me. "Ready," I said. My voice had settled into that flat, calm tone that makes people think you do not feel. I feel. I simply do not leak. We turned toward the hall. As we passed my son, I said quietly without anger, "Sit down, Ethan." It wasn't a request. It wasn't an insult. It was a sentence that gave him somewhere to put his legs. He sat, as if his knees had been waiting for orders, and the room released a breath it didn't know it was holding. In the hall, the air was cooler, the lights hummed, the world shrank to the squeak of the wheelchair, and the steady little blip of a monitor somewhere other than my chest. We moved past a door with a sign that said social work and another that said patient advocate. Two women inside were typing fast. One looked up as we went by. She had a face that knew how to listen. I thought then of a different kind of paper tucked away not in my coat, but in my lawyer's safe. The letter to my son that would come to him only if I failed to give it myself. Not a threat, a map. I wrote it the week after my wife was buried, in a house that smelled like lilies and dust and shirts that didn't know what to do without the person who wore them. I wrote about the villa, the one he once said wasn't mine anymore. I wrote about the table that wouldn't tip. I wrote about the conditions of a different kind of inheritance. Time, presence, grace. I wrote it in ink that does not fade when tears fall on it. Then I gave it to the lawyer and said, "Only when he is ready to read without burning the page." In observation, they settled me on a narrow bed and clipped wires to me like a strange, quiet jewelry. The nurse set the oxygen in place. The first cool breath ran across the inside of my nose like water from a clean spring. The pressure in my chest backed away another cautious inch. "Good," she said, scrolling through the monitor like it was a story she had read 100 times and still cared about. "You tell me if that pressure changes." I nodded. "I will." The young tech returned to draw blood. He tapped at my forearm and said, "Little pinch," and his hands were gentle, the way young men's hands can be when they remember their own grandfathers. The curtain whispered and opened a little. Not the doctor, Farah. She moved with the quiet of someone who knows how to go into rooms without stirring up dust. Her coat was simple, the color of winter grass. She carried no bag, just a folded scarf and her phone. Her hair, now more silver than I remembered, was covered loosely. She smiled, with her eyes first. "I am here," she said. 4 words. They warmed the room. The nurse looked from her to me. I nodded. "This is Farah," I said. "She's family." The nurse understood. Good nurses always do. She slid the chart onto its hook and stepped away with that light, skilled step that says, "This is your moment." Farah came closer, set her hand lightly on the rail. "I spoke to Dr. Malik," she said. "He is thorough. You will like him." I did already. "I do," I said. "Your timing is perfect." She smiled, not wide, just deep. "I told him to call if your name came up. He promised he would. I have been keeping my phone loud for months. I just didn't tell you because I know how you are." "Stubborn," I said. "Careful," she said. Same thing in our language. Her eyes shone, and for a second I saw my wife standing just behind her, hands in her shawl, nodding. The curtain moved again, and my son was there with his wife at his shoulder. He didn't walk in, he edged in, as if the air inside this square space had a temperature he couldn't guess. He looked at Farah, the way people look at a painting they are told is valuable, but they do not like. "Who are you?" he said, and the words were rude, but the tone was not strong enough to carry them far. Farah turned toward him and answered as if she were telling a child her name for the first time. "I am Farah," she said, "your mother's friend, her colleague, the person she asked to speak for your father in rooms where he might not have the breath to speak for himself." She did not raise her chin or her voice. She simply placed each word on the table between us like a clean spoon. "My mother would never," he started and stopped because he knew. He knew she would. She had. He shifted, then tried a different road. "This is manipulation," he said. He was grieving. You took advantage. Farah didn't blink. He was grieving, she agreed. And clear. I made sure of that. I explained every line. He signed because he wanted to keep the promise he made to your mother. Clarity, not chaos. If you don't like the plan, You can dislike it. But it is the plan, and it is legal. She didn't invite him to argue again. She turned back to me. Your wife made me promise to show up when paper was needed. Here I am. My throat tightened in a way the oxygen couldn't fix, and I swallowed the feeling down the way men do when the room is not theirs. My son stared at me. Why didn't you tell me? He asked. And for the first time all evening, the question sounded like a real question, not a demand. I looked at him the way I used to look at him across a chessboard when he was 12 and trying to win fast. Because you do not listen when I tell you things you do not want to hear, I said. So I told the paper instead. Paper listens, paper waits. He flinched as if I had reached across the rail and flicked him with my finger. His wife's mouth opened, then shut. The monitor hummed, the oxygen whispered. Farah stood like a lighthouse, steady, catching nothing and throwing back a clear, calm light. The doctor appeared again, slid in without drama, and checked the monitor. Troponin is pending, he said, but your EKG shows some changes that make me want to be careful. Your chest X-ray is reassuring. We'll keep you under observation and repeat labs. If your pain returns or pressure worsens, we have a plan. He glanced at Farah. She nodded once, the way a person nods when the recipe is familiar and well-written. He looked at my son, too, not unkindly. You're welcome to sit with him, he said. We allow one visitor at a time. Please keep voices low. Rest helps. Then to me. Any questions? I shook my head. One, I said, and he waited. If you had to choose between speed and caution right now, which would you pick? Caution, he said. We're not in the red zone. We're close enough to it that we don't take silly risks. Good, I said. I don't like silly. He smiled at that, almost against his will. Neither do I, he said, and left as softly as he had come. My son sat down in the lone chair. He didn't know where to put his hands, so he put them on his knees like a boy in a classroom. He stared at the floor. His wife stayed near the curtain, uncertain which world she belonged to. Farah looked at him for a moment, not with anger, but with the kind of sadness that respects itself. Your mother, she said quietly, used to bring homemade soup to the night nurses. She said salt belongs in soup and thank you belongs in night shifts. She asked me to carry that kind of memory for you if you forgot. He swallowed. The room tilted. He nodded once, a small, broken nod, and then looked at me. Do you want me to stay? He asked, and I had to work to keep my face from doing too much. I looked at the chair. I looked at Farah. I looked back at him. Yes, I said, sit, be quiet, watch. It was not a bridge restored. It was a plank placed. That is enough for a person to cross, if they choose. The next minutes slipped into each other like pages that didn't mind sharing a binding. The nurse came in and checked the cannula. The tech returned and swapped one labeled tube for another, each a small promise of data. Farah stood and sat and stood again, the way people do when they want to be useful and know that being there is the usefulness. My son didn't speak. He stared at the monitor as if the green line were a sentence he was learning to read. Once, the line jumped and made a quick tree of light. He flinched, then pretended he hadn't. I closed my eyes and listened to the music of machines and shoes and paper, and my own breath counting. A memory found me and sat down without asking. Not a big one, not a holiday. A Tuesday night when my son was 8 and the piano book kept sliding off the stand. He got up for the third time to put it back and then slammed the lid so hard the keys cried out. I can't, he said, choking on tears he didn't want. I kept my voice flat and my heart soft. You can't yet, I said. Not yet doesn't mean never. I put the book back and stood behind him and pointed to the notes. Again, I said. His back was hot through his t-shirt. He tried again. His hands found the shape. The melody arrived like a small bird tired of hiding. When it was over, he looked up at me with wet lashes and a look that said he had discovered he was stronger than he feared. Good, I said. Again tomorrow. Tonight, in the hospital, I wanted to say the same thing to both of us. Footsteps again. Not urgent. The doctor. He came with a piece of paper that made the nurse straighten in that way that says, here is the next card. Initial troponin is slightly elevated, he said. Not a heart attack yet, but a warning. We'll start you on a drip and keep you overnight. If numbers trend up or symptoms worsen, we'll escalate. If they settle, we'll map out a plan for the morning. You are not in the worst place. You are in the wise place. He met my eyes. I nodded. "Do it," I said. He turned to Farah, who had already taken out a pen. "I'll need your signature here to confirm what we discussed," he said. She signed with that clean, simple hand. He placed the paper back in the folder like a card in a deck that now belonged to the right player. My son watched her sign. He watched the doctor take the paper. He watched me breathe in and out with the little mustache of oxygen on my face. He tried to say something then, I think. His mouth shaped the beginning of a word. Maybe father, maybe sorry, maybe why. But no sound came. The room waited. The sound did not arrive. He closed his mouth, swallowed, and looked away. The waiting room that had stared before was not here to witness this smaller silence, but I felt the same weight in the air, the same roll of judgment and mercy, and the way the two sometimes sit down beside each other on a bench and share a sandwich. Farah touched my wrist, light. "I'll be here as long as they need me," she said. "I'll step out when you need quiet." "You're never in the way," I said. She smiled. "Your wife used to say the same thing," she answered, and for a moment the edge of grief cut me clean. Then it dulled. But it didn't disappear. Grief doesn't. It learns its place and sits there with its hands folded and looks at you when you look back. The nurse hung the drip. The liquid found its slow path into me. The machine hummed a new note. The pressure in my chest eased again. I tried a deeper breath. The air was there, waiting. The doctor nodded as if we had won a small, quiet game. He looked at my son once more. "If you want to help," he said in that even tone, "bring your father some water when the nurse says it is okay. Keep his phone quiet and let him rest. Do not try to manage anything that is not yours to manage, not tonight." He made it sound like care instructions for a plant that can thrive if you do not drown it. My son nodded. "Okay," he said, and his voice finally worked. It was small, but it was there. When the doctor left, Farah stood. "I will go call the clinic and let them know I'll be out tomorrow morning, just in case," she said. "I'll bring that cinnamon tea you hate and pretend you love it." "Bring it," I said. "I love it now." She laughed softly, and the sound slid something back into its proper place inside me. She turned to my son. "If you have questions, ask the advocate. Don't ask him. He needs to rest. Don't ask me to undo what your mother asked me to do. I won't." She said it kindly, which made it impossible to push against without falling over. She left. The curtain breathed and settled. My son sat. The chair creaked once, like a small ship at a dock. He looked at his hands. He looked at me. I didn't mean to be cruel," he said without looking up, and the words didn't change the evening, but they did change the air. "Then don't be," I said. "It costs the same to be decent." He nodded hard. A single tear made a fast line down his cheek and surprised him so much he wiped it away as if it were a bug. He laughed once, broken, and shook his head. "Mom would have—" He didn't finish the sentence, because he didn't have to. We both knew what she would have done. She would have brought soup. She would have brought a shawl. She would have brought a better son out of the one she had by reminding him of himself. In her absence, paper had done it. Paper and a doctor and a woman with silver in her hair who kept a promise. The room settled into the kind of quiet that does not accuse. The monitor blinked its patient green. The drip counted out its small seconds. The world outside kept its winter. Inside, the air was warm and clean. I closed my eyes, but I did not sleep. I thought about tables that don't tip and lighthouses that don't move, and the difference between turning away and stepping aside. I thought about the waiting room full of strangers who had watched a son try to make himself light by dropping what was heavy, and how the weight had rolled back to him anyway. I thought about responsibility, the kind you carry and the kind you pretend isn't yours. You cannot sign it away. You can only expose it for what it is. I opened my eyes and found my son watching me, not like a guard, not like a judge, but like a boy who is afraid to miss something important. "Sleep," I said. "I'll be here when you wake up." He nodded, and the nod meant more than he knew. He leaned back in the chair and closed his eyes and didn't sleep. Not really, but he let his face rest for the first time that day. I turned my head a little and looked at the edge of my wallet where a photo lived. I didn't take it. Out. I just touched the leather with my thumb and waited for the next breath and the next. Outside, somewhere, a door opened and let in a draft and shut again, and the room forgot the cold as quickly as it learned it. That is what rooms do. That is what hearts do too, when you help them. The advocate came first, a woman with square glasses and a soft voice that could fold a sharp thing in cloth. She introduced herself to me, to my son, and to his wife, and then, without scolding, she laid out the facts like playing cards. 1, 2, 3. We honor the patient's directive, she said, looking at Ethan kindly, and we document any attempt to limit medically indicated care. The phrase cheapest option is not a clinical category here. If a family member insists on refusing covered care, we ask them to sign a refusal form. That form becomes part of the record. She didn't raise an eyebrow. She didn't need to. The word record was enough. The waiting room, still close enough to hear because the curtain was not all the way closed, and because news has its own wind, shifted again. Small movements, paper sighs, the murmured rustle of people pretending not to listen and listening anyway. My son stared at the edge of the form she held, at the line where a person who is sure they will never be ashamed of their own name is supposed to sign. He breathed in. He could not push the air out as words. Twice now tonight, his mouth shaped a sound and found nothing there. He couldn't speak, the title had promised. And here we were, in the quiet truth of it. The advocate, to her credit, did not press. "We don't need that now," she said, sliding the refusal back under the rest of the papers. "Your father's plan covers the best course. The decision is made." She looked at me. "Do you have any questions for me?" "Just one," I said. "Is there a place where the night nurses keep their tea?" She smiled, surprised. "There is," she said. "By the break room, past the imaging doors." "Good," I said. "I have someone who will bring something worth brewing." Farah, who had stepped out to make her call, returned with a paper cup of water and the small, steady look she wore when clinics ran short on everything but need. She greeted the advocate by name, as if they had weathered more than one bad hour together, then came to my side. "You look better," she said, and I did. The oxygen lifted the tightness off my chest the way a careful hand lifts a heavy book from a sleeping lap. The numbers on the monitor whispered their approval. I closed my eyes for a moment and listened to the low hum of the building itself. Hospitals have hearts too, big metal ones, hidden in walls and rooms where only men with key cards go. From the chair, my son cleared his throat. "I shouldn't have said that," he managed, and though the room had not asked him to confess, the room accepted the confession anyway. It washed over the cheap sentence he had thrown into it like warm water. He pulled out his phone, then put it back in his pocket. A boy caught between the world that always answers him and the one that asks him to wait. His wife shifted, then stilled. I watched the play of thoughts across his face the way I used to watch clouds over the lake, first one shape, then another, the same sky behind all of it, anger, shame, fear, and under it, something small and stubborn that I hadn't seen in a while, a willingness to learn. Grief takes a long time to finish teaching. Maybe this was a late lesson. "Go to the vending machines," I said, my voice flat and easy, as if I were asking him to fetch a screwdriver from the garage. "Bring back 2 bottles of water and a little packet of crackers. Ask the nurse before you offer anything, and when you pass the break room, ask where they keep the mugs." He stood without asking why. He needed simple orders. He needed to move. His wife followed him with her eyes, and then, to my surprise, touched Farah's sleeve. "What kind of tea?" she asked, the question small and human and good. "Cinnamon," Farah said. "He will pretend to hate it. He does not." The wife nodded and slipped her phone out again, this time not as a shield, but as a tool for a task that had nothing to do with escape. While they were gone, the advocate explained a few more things. "You'll be admitted to a room once we have a bed," she said. "But observation is fine for now. If anyone approaches you with paperwork you don't recognize, ask for me or for Ruth. Tonight, we keep circles small." Circles small. I like that. "We will," I said. "Thank you for saying it like that." She smiled, and the smile had the shape of a long shift done right. She left the copies in a neat stack and told me she would be nearby if anything went sideways. "Things go sideways," she said, with no drama at all. "It's our job to turn them forward again." When Ethan and his wife returned, the room had softened by a degree you can't measure without skin. He held 2 waters like trophies he wasn't sure he deserved. She held a small box of tea bags, the kind wrapped in paper with a little string, bright cinnamon sticks sketched on the front. "The nurse said no crackers yet," Ethan reported, eyes flicking to the monitor like it might grade him. "Water is fine." He stood there waiting for instructions. It is hard to know what to do with your hands when the old script in your head has burned away. "Set them on the table," I said. "Sit." He obeyed. He looked smaller in the chair now, not because he had shrunk, but because he had finally put down armor that made him bigger and more brittle than he needed to be. Night slid its face against the windows and left a cold smear there. The hospital hummed the way a well-run ship hums, steady and full of work. In the gap between the curtain and the wall, I could see a piece of the waiting room again. Faces had changed as people were called and treated and sent away, but the feeling had not. A kind of quiet opinion lingered. If you ask me whether strangers' eyes matter, I will tell you no. I will also tell you that sometimes the eyes of strangers are mirrors, and a man who will not look in his own mirror may check himself in theirs. Ethan had seen himself there. The film will replay for him for a long time. He may hate it. He may learn from it. Both can be true. I thought about a day years ago, the first time I tried to teach him to drive in the empty grocery store lot on a Sunday morning. He was 14 and tall and impatient, and convinced that a thing not learned in 5 minutes was a thing not worth learning. His hands on the wheel were too tight. His right foot wanted to make the world go faster than it could. "Breathe," I told him, flat and calm. "Car goes where your eyes go." He stared at the yellow line in front of the hood, as if he could push it into shape. The car drifted toward a curb. He jerked it back, heart banging. "See," he said, angry with fear. "I can't." "You will," I said. "Look farther down. The road wants to be slow if you let it." Later, he drove us home. Later than that, he forgot the lesson and then remembered it. Tonight I watched his hands rest open on his knees and thought, look farther down. The road is longer than this hour. Farah brewed the tea somewhere down the hall and brought it in a dented steel mug with a lid that squeaked when you turned it. She opened it and the smell reached me before the steam. Cinnamon and something sweet, like the kitchen when my wife used to bake in winter just to warm the house. I took a careful sip and closed my eyes against the heat. "Too strong?" Farah asked. I shook my head. "Just right." She gave one of the mugs to the nurse when she came to check the drip. "For your break," Farah said. "Night wants sugar." The nurse laughed once, a small sound like a bell in fog. "Night always wants sugar," she said. "Thank you." The doctor returned with results and a plan written in the simple lines of that pen voice I had grown to trust in a single evening. "We'll keep you on the drip," he said. "Recheck labs at midnight and at 3. I'm admitting you to the cardiac floor. When a bed opens, we'll move you. No heroic measures tonight, just wisdom." I nodded. "I have little taste for heroes," I said. "Heroes forget to come home." He half smiled. "We prefer people who do," he said. He looked at Ethan. "You can stay until they move him, then visiting hours end. In the morning, we start again." Ethan nodded. He did not argue with a clock for once. The clock is firm even with rich men and loud ones. There was a brief stir by the curtain, and then the sound I had expected since the moment the cheap sentence left my son's mouth. The mother-in-law's voice coming down the hall, syrup over ice. "Where is he? Where is my poor son?" She swept the curtain aside before anyone could say a word. Saw the wires, the drip, the oxygen. Saw me sitting upright with a calm face I knew would make her angry. Saw Farah. Saw the advocate's neat stack of papers, and went straight for the nearest corner of control. "This is too much," she said to Ethan, not looking at me. "We cannot afford this. Tell them to slow down. Tell them to wait." It was a command dressed as a whisper. She has always spoken like that, as if volume is vulgar but manipulation is polite. "Ma'am," I said, and my voice was flat and not cruel. "Your opinion is a guest tonight, not a resident." She blinked as if I had spoken in a language she did not expect to hear in a hospital. "I'm family," she said, and she said the word like an entitlement. "You are related," I said. "Family is a different job." Farah stood and placed herself in a line between the woman and the wires, not like a guard, like a wall you don't notice until you walk into it. "The plan is set," she said, her voice soft and firm together. "The costs are covered. The patient is stable. You may sit if you can be quiet. You may go if you cannot." The mother-in-law's mouth went thin. She looked at Ethan for rescue and found him looking at the floor. "Ethan," she said, and in that one name she tried to stuff years of training. years of telling him what to do and who to be. He looked up at her, and for the first time I saw him let a sentence drop between them that might keep him whole or end him, depending on how he carried it later. "Not tonight," he said, flat, not loud. "Sit down or go home." The room, the air, the past, everything listened. Her cheeks colored as if someone had lit a match behind her skin. She set her bag down like she was setting down a child who had become suddenly heavy. She sat. She stayed quiet. For once, the lesson did not require more. "Good," I said, not to any of them, but to the air that had thickened and now thinned. I breathed in, I breathed out. The numbers on the screen kept time with the slow patience of machines that have seen worse. Farah took her seat again, without fuss. The advocate, somewhere just outside, spoke softly to someone else facing a different storm. The building went on, moving people from one kind of hour to another. Between midnight and 3, you see the hospital as it really is, when the day people go home and the night people carry the weight without announcing it. A janitor with a shy smile replaced the bin liner and whispered, "Get well soon." A security guard leaned in, scanned a badge reader, and nodded like a salute. A phlebotomist with a tattoo of a little moon on her wrist took the next blood draw and told me her father liked cinnamon tea too. My son dozed and woke and dozed, each time surprised to find himself still sitting, still inside this room that had not asked for him, and then had. His wife scrolled, silently, then put the phone away and sat with her hands folded, eyes on some middle distance where the better version of herself might be waiting if she would only walk there. The mother-in-law checked her watch, her patience, her control. Finding no purchase, she finally stood and said she would come back in the morning. No one stopped her. The curtain sighed behind her when she left, relieved to be allowed to be a curtain again. At 2, Farah looked at me, and I knew she was measuring whether leaving would be kindness or cruelty. "Go home," I said. "Sleep. Come back when the sun remembers us." She squeezed my hand. "Stubborn," she said, and I said, "Careful," and she laughed under her breath. To Ethan, she said, "There's soup in your freezer. Your mother taught me to make it. Heat it tomorrow. Eat sitting down." He nodded, not trusting his voice, and she went. When she was gone, the room felt larger. The quiet was honest. Ethan watched the green line for a long time, and then said, half to himself, "She asked you to do all that, didn't she?" My mother. She planned it. I took a breath. I could have told him everything then. The trust, the villa, the table, the letter. I could have used the night to win, but winning is a childish word for a man this old. "We planned it," I said. "Together. We decided not to make you carry decisions you were not built to carry, not then." He nodded, a slow movement like a boat turning toward the channel. "I thought I was built for everything," he said. "That's about right," I said, "until a day shows you you're not." He was quiet for a while. Then he said, "Dad," and the word was small and new in his mouth again. I waited. "I can do better," he said finally, and the sentence startled me by not sounding like a promise to me. It sounded like a promise to himself. That is the only kind worth making. I wanted to tell him about the letter. I wanted to tell him about the trust. I wanted to tell him about the clinic wing with my wife's name that would one day make the night smell like cinnamon for other people in other rooms. Instead, I said, "Then do it." My voice was flat. My heart was not. At 3, the lab runner brought back numbers that made Dr. Malik smile in that small way of his that is almost like a man thanking a stranger under his breath. "Trending down," he said. "Good." He wrote orders. He spoke to the nurse. He touched the edge of the folder like a man touching a map he has used to get many people home. He glanced at Ethan and gave him a single, simple job. "If he reaches for the water," he said, "hand it to him. Not too fast." Ethan nodded. He did it once, twice, exactly right. It was a small thing. It was also the beginning of a different kind of strength. The bed upstairs opened at last, as night began to loosen its hold. They wheeled me toward the elevator with a soft rattling sound I will always, somehow, be fond of. The hallway lights clicked by like slow metronomes. The waiting room we passed was a new one, with new faces that would never know what the old one had seen. The elevator doors slid shut, and in the mirror I saw my face pale and calm. Saw my son behind me pushing gently with the orderly. Saw his mouth set in a line that had nothing to do with pride and everything to do with care. He caught my eye in the mirror and looked away, embarrassed to be seen doing something right. Upstairs, the room had a window that watched the dark give up its last ground to the thin gray of morning. The nurse tucked me in as if I were something worth tucking. "You'll rest now," she said, and my body, convinced by kindness where it refuses to be commanded by force, agreed. Ethan stood awkwardly at the foot of the bed, not sure if he should leave, not sure if he should stay. "Go," I said. "Sleep. Come back when the doors say you can." He nodded. He stepped to the side of the bed and hesitated, then leaned forward and did the smallest, bravest thing of the night. He touched my shoulder, once, his hand warm and careful. The touch of a man who has been told not to touch anything unless he can be gentle. "Okay," he whispered. He tried to say more. The word did not come. He couldn't speak. That was fine. He didn't have to. The hand said what the mouth could not. When they left, the room held me the way rooms hold what is quiet and still. I turned my head toward the window, toward the cheap gray ribbon of dawn, and thought of my wife's shawl, and the table that doesn't tip, and the safe behind the books. I thought of paper, and how it waits, and how it speaks, and how it had spoken for me tonight, not with triumph, but with steady, decent authority. I thought of the letter that still waits for morning, the one that will end this story the way it should be ended, with clarity, not chaos, justice that is not loud, only accurate. I closed my eyes, the machines hummed. The world, for once, did not demand anything of me but breath. Morning came in strips of gray that slowly turned the window pale. The room upstairs held a quieter kind of hum, the sound a ship makes when the sea has settled. I woke to numbers that were steady, and a chest that felt like it had been carrying a heavy bucket, and finally put it down. The oxygen whispered. The drip counted. My body believed the new plan. Dr. Malik came in with his quiet step and checked the screen with a glance that told me more than his words would. "Better," he said. "We stay the course. If it keeps looking like this, we talk discharge in a day or two with a follow-up plan you'll hate because it involves vegetables and walking." I gave him the almost smile we had learned to trade. "I will endure both," I said. He nodded, tapped the folder once, and I thought again of maps, how some are drawn in pencil and some are engraved. When he left, the nurse straightened the sheet as if smoothing a thought. "Your proxy will be by later," she said, and the advocate suggested a family conversation in the quiet room, if you want that. I wanted it, not for drama, for clarity. My wife used to say, hard truths should sit in chairs, not hover in doorways. I closed my eyes for a moment and let her sentence sit down beside my bed. The chair didn't tip. Ethan arrived with a face that had not slept long, but had slept honestly. He looked at me and then away, the way a person checks the horizon before they look at the compass. He carried a paper cup with a lid and the carefulness of a man who has been told not to spill. "Coffee," he said, "for Farah. She's parking." He set it on the table like an offering. His wife stood behind him, hair pulled back, a plain sweater in place of last night's gloss. She looked smaller without the noise she used to make around herself, and I liked her better for it. "Good morning," she said, and the words weren't brave or bright, but they were clean. "Good morning," I said. "Sit, both of you." They sat. Farah slipped in a few minutes later with that tide-level calm of hers, the kind that makes rooms behave. She greeted the nurse by name, nodded to Ethan and his wife, and then laid her hand on the rail. "We meet," she said, not a question about permission, a question about timing. "We meet," I said. The advocate appeared as if she had been waiting just out of sight for that one word. "The quiet room is free," she said. 15 minutes if you like, longer if you need. 15 minutes is long enough for truth if you sharpen it first." I asked for the folder from the drawer. The nurse handed it over. The paper inside had been folded twice. I had unfolded it last night while no one was watching, and smoothed the creases with my thumb, the way a carpenter checks a surface for splinters. It felt ready. We moved slow, a little train of necessary people. Me in the chair, the nurse with the drip pole, Ethan with his hand on the back of the chair, and the careful push a son gives when he is trying to learn delicacy. Farah holding the coffee in a thin envelope, the advocate clearing a path with her presence. The quiet room had 2 chairs, a table that did not wobble, and a window that looked at a tired tree clinging to the last of its leaves. The door shut with a soft sound that felt like someone laying a blanket over a sleeping child. "I asked you here," I said, "because last night began one conversation, and I intend to finish it." My voice was the flat lake again, but there was enough sun on it to show depth. I looked at Ethan. I did not look away when he tried to look aside. You said, at the desk, he's not my responsibility anymore. Do the cheapest thing. You said it to a stranger and to your father at the same time. You turned away. That happened. He swallowed. He didn't argue. The advocate watched the air like a referee watches the ball, not the hands. Farah's eyes were on me, steady. My wife was there, in the angle of the light on the table. I could feel her. That helped. I am not here to spit thunder, I went on. Thunder is loud and empty. I am here to put paper on the table and let it do what it does. I opened the folder and took out the first document. This, I said, sliding it toward him, is the trust your mother and I built after we buried her. I wanted to crawl into the ground with her. Instead, I signed this. It holds the villa you once told me wasn't mine anymore. It holds the account that has paid for your comfort more than once. It holds a fund your mother insisted on for the clinic that kept her warm when she was the coldest. It is irrevocable. It does not belong to your impulse or mine. I let that sit. Paper should rest before you cut it. He reached out, but his hand stopped halfway. His mouth opened. No sound. He couldn't speak. Again. And this time the silence wasn't born from arrogance. It was born from the knowledge that words should not try to do a job that belongs to listening. He closed his mouth and nodded once. I slid the second document. This is the letter I wrote for you, on a night when lilies were already wilting in vases and your mother's shawl still held her shape on the chair. It says what I am telling you now, but it says it without the interruption of breath. You will read it later, alone. Do not burn it. Do not show it to anyone who likes gossip. He half smiled, broken. I won't, he said, and the sound of his voice after the blankness made the room exhale. I placed the third page. These, I said, are the conditions your mother asked me to attach to any part of this trust that might become yours one day. She believed in tests that make men, not exams, work, they are simple. 1. 100 hours of service at the clinic that bears her name when it is built, not a donation, your hands. 2. Dinner with me once a week, no phones, no excuses, for a year after I am discharged, even if the food is bad and the conversation is worse. 3. Therapy, 6 months, paid by me, not because you are broken, but because you are not finished. 4. An apology to Nurse Ruth and to Dr. Malik and to the advocate for the sentence at the desk. Not a speech. A sentence that is the opposite of the one you said. 5. A boundary you will set and hold with anyone, including your mother-in-law, who tells you to choose money over honor. You will write it down and sign it. 6. The villa stays in trust, and the table stays in the dining room, and you will eat at it with me and not talk about selling things while we are using them to be a family. I stopped. The room watched the words land and settle in the air, like small birds finding branches. He looked at the pages the way he had looked at the monitor last night, reading for a rhythm he could keep. His wife was very still, and then I saw her shoulders drop a fraction, like someone finally put this right weight in her hands and she could stop juggling. I can do that, he said at last, voice low. He said it not to please me, not to perform for Farah or the advocate, but to the table, to himself. He looked up. I can do that, he said again, stronger, as if he needed to hear the echo. The advocate nodded once, professional and satisfied. Farah's smile was small and full of miles. Good, I said. Then we start now. I asked the advocate to call Ruth and Doctor Malik if they were free for a minute. She went and returned with both. Ruth still wore the small pin with her name and the tired eyes that keep opening for people anyway. Dr. Malik stood just inside the door, not wanting to take over, the way good captains know a ship can sail without them for a moment. Ethan stood up. He looked at Ruth, and this time his mouth didn't fail him. I spoke cruelly at your desk, he said, simple. I was wrong. I am sorry. I asked for the cheapest thing for a man who never gave me anything cheap. You deserve better words. He did too. Ruth blinked twice, like last night, but different. Thank you, she said. Words matter. He turned to Dr. Malik. Thank you for not listening to me, he said. Malik's mouth twitched at the edge. You're welcome, he said. I try to keep that a limited service. The The room let itself smile. Back in the corridor, we passed the waiting room on the way to the elevator. It was a morning crowd now, new coats, new phones, new kinds of fear. But the air in a waiting room remembers things. A woman with a toddler glanced up, and then at Ethan, and then at me, and then back at the paperwork in my lap, and I saw recognition that had no face to attach itself to. It didn't matter. These rooms hold stories in their chairs. They talk to each other after we leave. They say, a son arrived loud and left quiet. They say, a nurse kept her spine. They say, a doctor carried paper like a lantern. They say, the man with the calm voice did not shout and still won. On the cardiac floor, the day moved forward. Tests repeated. Numbers behaved. I ate something the color of beige and thanked it for its effort. Ethan fetched water when the nurse nodded. He didn't rush. He didn't try to earn points. He tried to do one small thing well and then another. His wife sat and asked Farah about soup, and Farah told her which pot to use. And for a minute, the three of them looked like people planning a morning that didn't involve machines. The mother-in-law came back and opened her mouth to begin a sentence that would have broken the table. But Ethan gave her a look that was his father's voice in his own eyes, and she sat and stayed quiet, and the sentence died a good death. Around noon, the advocate came with a form and a gentle face. I will make copies of these conditions for the file, she said, with your permission. Do it, I said. Paper keeps promises better than memory. Ethan signed beneath the line that said acknowledgement. His pen didn't shake. He looked at me after, waiting for a verdict I refused to give. We'll see, I said. It's not an exam, it's a year. He nodded. Around 3, Dr. Malik stood at the foot of the bed and gave me the plan for after. We send you home tomorrow if the numbers keep trending right, he said. Medication, diet, walking, follow-ups. You'll hate parts of it. Hate is fine. Compliance is better. I will comply, I said. I have someone to irritate over dinner on Thursdays. He looked at Ethan, and Ethan did not flinch. I'll bring the food, he said. First time, you can complain about it. We'll work up to vegetables. Evening came, and with it a thin pink that surprised the window. I thought of the villa's lake at that hour, when the water wears rose for a few minutes and pretends to be gentle. I thought of the table waiting in the dining room. I thought of my wife's shawl folded in the drawer, and the smell of cinnamon in a kitchen that had survived worse storms than this one. Farah leaned down, touched my forehead with the back of her hand the way my mother once did. You'll be fine, she said. And if you are not, we will pretend you are until you are, because we are stubborn and careful. She gathered her scarf. She waited for me to say something I had been holding. I let it out. Thank you, I said, and I said it to her, and to my wife, and to the woman in the break room who would drink sweet tea at 2 a.m. and keep the machines humming. Night slipped in again, the drip slowed, the nurse adjusted the line. Ethan stood, hesitant. I'll go, he said. I'll be here early. He looked like he wanted to touch my shoulder the way he had in the dawn, but he checked my face first, and I gave him a small nod. He placed his hand there, light, then lifted it. Thank you for the map, he said. Maps don't walk for you, I answered. You still have to move your legs. He smiled, real and quick. Then I'll walk, he said. He glanced at Ruth on his way out. I'll see you tomorrow, he told her, and the words were not an apology this time, just a promise. She nodded once, and her eyes softened. Tomorrow, she said, like a blessing. After they left, the room grew big with quiet again, the good kind. I turned my head toward the window and watched the city put on its lights one by one, like a patient putting on buttons. I thought about men who think turning away is power, and the difference between leaving and stepping aside. I thought about responsibility, how it has a way of climbing back into the right hands if you give it time and the right papers. I thought about the waiting room and its stairs and how they are sometimes the mirror a person needs when their own mirror has been lying. I thought about justice that is not a show. It is a set of clean lines on a page and a man who refuses to be loud and still wins. If you have read this far, if you have smelled the disinfectant with me and heard the printer stutter and watched a son try to spend the wrong currency at a counter that only takes dignity, tell me where you are watching from. Tell me the moment you felt the room tilt. Tell me if you have ever kept your voice in your pocket and let paper speak for you. And if you believe in quiet power, in clarity over chaos, in tables that don't tip, do the small, loud thing that rooms like this can't do for themselves. Like this, share it with someone who needs a map and drop a comment with the words, "Clarity, not chaos," so I know you were here, sitting in this waiting room with me, watching a man learn to speak by learning first to be silent.